He wasn't born ready. He wasn't born confident. He wasn't born strong. In truth, he was born behind, and he knew it. As a child, he struggled to read. Letters wouldn't line up. Words slid across the page. Sentences took too long to make sense, as if the world was always one step ahead of him. While other boys moved forward naturally, he lagged behind, not because he was lazy, but because he was fighting something invisible. Every page was work. Every lesson quietly exposed his limits, and that kind of thing marks a man early. He was too sensitive for a world that admired fearless warriors. Too inward for a country that celebrated brute strength, fast decisions, and firm voices, and too aware of his own flaws to fake the confidence everyone expected. He thought too much, felt too much, watched too much, and in environments that value immediate action, that isn't seen as depth, it's seen as weakness. The weight grew heavier because he didn't come from nothing. He came from a family with tradition, a known name, a past filled with men who looked like they were born to command. That kind of legacy doesn't inspire someone who feels ready. It crushes someone who feels small, because carrying a big name when you don't yet believe in yourself doesn't create pride. It creates pressure. He wanted to be a soldier. Not for glory, but because he wanted to belong to something larger than his own insecurity. Nothing seemed to help. His body didn't impress. His temperament wasn't aggressive. And his mind, at that moment, still didn't obey pressure. He didn't look like command material. He didn't look like a man meant to lead others. And deep down, he suspected it himself. No medals, no accomplishments, no stories to tell. Just a persistent fear of not measuring up to a world that expected something from him. The war he imagined wasn't the real war. Before it began, war still made sense in his head. It followed logic. It rewarded preparation, study, effort. In books, there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. Men knew what to do. Decisions were clear: honor, movement, victory. But the first real contact shattered all of that in minutes. Nothing made sense. The noise wasn't just loud, it was paralyzing. It didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere at once. Shouts came without context. Orders arrived late, broken, or wrong. Men moved because others moved, not because they knew where to go. He realized something disturbing far too early. No one was fully in control. Not the officers, not the veterans, not him. And when it was time to react, he froze. Not completely, not visibly, but enough. The kind of hesitation that doesn't earn punishment, but leaves a mark. He did what was expected, just not the way he imagined he would. Not with confidence, not with clarity, with effort. The worst moment wasn't public, it was internal. Because in the middle of that chaos, he had a thought that deeply shamed him. Maybe I'm not built for this. It wasn't cowardice. It was brutal clarity. He looked around and saw men who functioned better under pressure, who cursed, laughed nervously, adapted fast. And he thought too much, felt too much, observed too much. When it ended, or at least slowed, he returned to a cramped, improvised space with no comfort at all. He sat down, removed his gear slowly, felt the real weight of his body for the first time, and realized something simple and devastating. No one was watching him. No one wrote his name down. No one commented on his performance. No one would remember him that night. He hadn't failed heroically. He had failed irrelevantly. That first night under real pressure, he didn't sleep. Not out of bravery, but because his mind wouldn't stop turning against him. Every mistake replayed. Every second of hesitation repeated. Every comparison grew heavier. He thought about the name he carried, about what was expected of him, about the fear of being exposed as someone ordinary. His body begged for rest. His mind refused. And there, alone with his thoughts, he had a realization that changed everything, not as an epic revelation, but as an uncomfortable truth. Courage doesn't show up when you need it. Leadership doesn't come from wanting it. And respect isn't inherited, it's taken from reality. He understood that wanting to be strong meant nothing. War didn't care about the man he imagined himself to be. It only cared about the man who showed up under pressure. And at that moment, that man didn't exist yet. That was the night the fantasy died. And because of that, something real began to form. There was no speech, No gathering of men. No raised voices. No promises. There was no oath because no one was there to hear it. The change didn't happen outwardly, it happened inside. That night after the noise, after the confusion, after the shame, he sat in silence, staring at nothing. He thought about going to sleep, about letting it pass, about accepting the easy explanation. It's just the beginning. Everyone messes up. It gets better with time. It was a comfortable explanation, and that's exactly why it was dangerous. He realized something few men are willing to admit. It wasn't the mistake that scared him. It was the possibility of getting used to it, of becoming the man who's always one step behind, the man who never fails badly enough to be removed, but never succeeds enough to be remembered, the invisible man. He could have pulled back emotionally, done what many do, follow orders, stay in the flow, disappear into the hierarchy. He could have accepted being just another competent officer, another name on a list, another face no one looks for when things go wrong. He knew that path. It was safe, comfortable, and quietly lethal. But that night, he stayed, not physically, internally. He stayed with the discomfort, with the shame, with the feeling of inadequacy without numbing it. He didn't run from the thought that hurt the most. If I keep going like this, I'll never be ready. Then came the decision. Not big, not heroic, almost pathetic in how small it was. He decided he would never again be unprepared inside, not to impress anyone, not to lead men yet, but to never feel that way again. He began studying obsessively, not to know more, but to not fail. He studied strategy, history, human behavior. He studied other men's mistakes like open wounds. He trained beyond what was required, not to show strength, but because a tired body quiets a scattered mind. And harder than all of it, he trained his own thinking. He learned to control fear before trying to defeat it. He learned to recognize hesitation before it became paralysis. He learned to observe himself as if he were another man. He didn't want to be a hero. That's the part most people miss. He didn't want to fail again, didn't want that knot in his stomach, didn't want that inner voice telling him he didn't belong, didn't want to carry the quiet shame of knowing he could have been better, and wasn't. That was the micro decision. No applause, no record, no witnesses. And that's exactly how real change begins. Not with noise, not with promises, but with a man alone, determined not to disappear. Your mind may not be able to explain what's happening yet, but it feels it, because everyone has been there. He didn't wake up different. No special morning, no sense of, now I've changed. On the outside, everything looked the same. Same uniform, same position, same face no one searched for. But inside, something no longer moved the same way. In the barracks, he was still underestimated. Not because he was bad, but because he didn't draw attention. He didn't speak loudly, didn't tell stories, didn't joke at the right moments. And in military environments, that's often mistaken for weakness. Men looked at him and saw someone too proper, too polite, too controlled. The kind of officer you ignore until you need him. At first, no one noticed what he was doing. They just saw that he arrived early, left late, that he was always reading something that didn't look required, that he trained when no one was watching. To some, it looked like vanity. To others, desperation. To most, irrelevant. The change didn't come in big moments, it came in small details. An order given clearly, a decision made half a second before chaos, a correction made without humiliation. Too small for bar talk, big enough to prevent mistakes. When things went wrong, he wasn't the first to speak, but when he did, no one interrupted. Not because they liked him, but because what he said worked. That irritated people, because it breaks the logic of underestimation. It's easy to ignore someone weak, hard to ignore someone useful. Some began to test him, questioning orders, ignoring suggestions, waiting for him to fail under pressure. It was a silent trap. If he failed, it confirmed everything they believed. If he succeeded, It created resentment. He felt it, and didn't react, didn't argue, didn't fight for space. He let results speak. Slowly, something shifted. Nothing official, nothing declared. But when problems appeared, eyes turned to him. When doubt surfaced, they waited for his reaction. When pressure increased, his voice didn't shake. That creates a strange kind of respect. Not admiration, dependence. Still, no one called him a leader. Not yet. Because accepting that would mean admitting something uncomfortable. That the underestimated man was becoming necessary. And hierarchical systems hate admitting misjudgment. He felt that weight, not as victory, but as risk. Because being noticed doesn't mean being accepted. It means being watched. Every success raised expectations. Every silence became a test. He knew it. One mistake now would cost more than before. But he didn't step back, because he had learned the real rule. Talent doesn't make a man a reference. Consistency under pressure does, and that he had already decided not to lose. That's how the transition happened. No applause, no promotion, no speech. A man no one respected became a man no one ignored. And in that kind of environment, that changes everything. Years later, when noise no longer rattled him, when silence no longer shamed him, when the barracks already knew his weight, the world finally looked at him. Not through announcement, not through ceremony, but through forced recognition, the kind that arrives when ignoring someone becomes expensive. By then, underestimation had a cost. He was no longer the inadequate man, no longer the officer no one called. His name moved carefully through rooms, not with affection, with restrained respect. Men listened when he spoke. Officers recalculated when he entered, and those who once doubted watched quietly. Underestimation still existed, but no longer as jokes, as contained fear. Only then did the world know him by another name, not as the insecure young man tripping over his limits, not as the overlooked officer no one bet on, but as George S. Patton, the general who looked forged from steel, the commander who advanced while others calculated retreat, the aggressive strategist who refused half measures. From the outside, it looked like natural talent, like destiny, like he'd always been that way. That's the comfortable lie history likes to tell. The truth is harder and stronger. Patton wasn't born strong. He was shaped by pressure. Every explosion the world saw was backed by internal control learned the hard way. Every fast decision came from years training his mind not to hesitate. Every confident gesture was built on the old fear of becoming invisible again. He didn't advance because he was fearless. He advanced because he'd already hit bottom. He didn't shout because he loved noise. He shouted because he understood what disorganized silence does. He didn't underestimate the enemy because he himself had been underestimated. And that matters. That's why his story holds. Because it doesn't begin with greatness. It begins with shame, with comparison, with the universal feeling of not being enough. Exactly where most people have been. The difference is he didn't run from that place. He didn't numb it. Didn't hide behind excuses. He stayed when no one saw value, stayed when failure was more likely than victory, stayed when disappearing would have been easier, and staying, that's what turns ordinary men into something the world can no longer ignore. The name George S. Patton wasn't born ready. It was pulled out of doubt, pressure, and underestimation. And that's why, when the world finally realized who he was, it was already too late to treat him as just another man. Because men who learn to survive being underestimated when they reach the top, they don't ask for space, they take it.